Thank you. Thank you. We have just resumed the meeting after asking some questions in relation to the confidential attachment. So we are dealing with item 11.7, the Waffle Grand Final 2022 at Leederville Oval. Councillors, for those who haven't already spoken, are there any further debate or questions on the item? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously with Councillor Warner absent due to financial interest. Okay, the next item is 12.1, adoption of corporate business plan 22-23 to 25-26 and 4-year capital works program 22-23 to 25-26. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I'm supportive of the officer recommendation in relation to the corporate business plan and capital works program.
Councillor Loden. Councillors, Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. I did ask a question at briefing, which I felt wasn't answered. I'm happy to just receive that on notice, even though we're voting on it today. I think it was important, the point about that question, and the question that was asked was on a project by project basis, what is the committed spend year on year, and also what proportion of the capital works would be funded from municipal funds. I recognise that with a long-term financial plan, because it's a longer period, a longer horizon, you will entertain more uncertainty because you have to. When you're looking at a 4-year plan, it's obviously much more certain, and then you can be much more definitive in the stuff. There's nothing really here that actually concerns me other than the fact that I've got a concern with a long-term financial plan, which then informs this. So yeah, so I have no doubt that this will be, that council will approve this, but from my mind, I'm very methodical in my thinking. I feel like I have to make sure that the long-term financial plan is there and that what's in this plan is supported by the long-term financial plan. And therefore, because of the exclusions I mentioned before, I'm going to have some issue with it, but I'm sure I'll be in the dissent, which is fine. Thanks.
Through Mayor Cole, just to note, it was very late, but the manager of financial services did send through that attachment in Excel in the manner and form that you requested, but you would have only got it 5 minutes to 6.
Councillors, Councillor Alexander.
Could I just ask, with the 4-year capital works program, comes to a total of 67 million and a couple of 100,000 over 4 years. Generally, the city spent something like 9.5 or 10 would be the record amount spent around 2017. What gives us confidence that $67,619,288 is, you know, what's going to be different to previous years that the expenditure will go out the door?
Who would like to take this question?
I will. Thank you.
Thanks,
Mayor.
Director.
It is the 4-year capital works program, apart from year 1, is essentially has some flexibility in it in respect to addressing environmental changes. So whether we can deliver a project or not based on whether there are quantity surveying issues arising or procurement issues arising. Nevertheless, one of the things that infrastructure and environment are looking at closely in respect to the delivery of capital works programs is its capacity to deliver, and whether that capacity is actually taken up as a cost or a component of the capital works project, and whether that project management cost is delivered through an FTE or contracted basis based on the forthcoming program. So currently I&E, Infrastructure and Environment, are looking at the 4-year program and identifying those projects that are within it, which they think they have capacity to be able to deliver in-house, and those projects that they need to consider whether they need to be delivered through other means, and how that funding will occur, and whether that funding will be a part of the capital works program.
No, not really. Through you, Mayor. I'm trying to understand what's going to be different to other years. That's all. You know, given that we're going into a time where there's labour's hard to get and materials hard to get. During the GFC, the global financial crisis, a lot of organisations actually suspended some of their programs. So we're in tough times to actually deliver. So what gives the council and anyone in general confidence that that money's actually going to be spent? Which is an extraordinary to what's happened in normal times and when we're in adverse times.
Through the chair, it comes down to being able to, I guess the first test is going to be procurement. And if you don't go through a procurement process to inform whether there is the ability to get those projects delivered, then you're essentially deferring projects might not necessarily be need to be deferred. A couple of the initiatives that the city is looking at, first of all, we're seeking to lobby WOLGA to be able to provide industry updates across any procurement issues that are happening within the industry and delivering capital works. So whether there are supply issues in certain areas. So that's one thing that we'll be pursuing, so we can be front end informed in those issues. The other matter is that I think the city is starting to deliver some more rigor around its project planning and delivery. And as that beds in, I think that we'll better manage, one, the delivery of the projects, and certainly manage the works in progress or carry forwards that occur as a consequence of either a late commencement of a project or those multi-year projects that need to be managed.
And we can assess at each budget year what the economic conditions are as we go and adopt the capital works program for the budget year. So it is another indicative tool. Any further questions, Councillor Alexander?
I'll skeptically leave it at that.
Fair enough. Councillors, any further debate or questions on this item? Okay, I'll put the substantive motion. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Alexander and Councillor Opolo voting against. The next item, the final item for this evening is 12.3. Councillor Opolo, this is the item in which you have a financial interest. Councillor Opolo, you're sort of still in the chamber. Unless you want to close the doors, administration. Okay, councillors, can I please have a mover for item 12.3, claim for reimbursement legal costs? Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Warner.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this item. I appreciate the advice and the clarification that's been provided since we deferred it from last month. I had questions at that time around how we could determine whether it related to personal matters or in the function as a council member. And I'm satisfied that they've been answered now. I think it is important that we went through that process because I think as Councillor Wallace pointed out last time around, this is a highly sensitive issue and it's something that we need to make sure is examined with the greatest of rigour. So I'm satisfied that that has now been applied and that we've now received the required documentation from Councillor Apollo as prescribed by our policy. So happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Councillor Warner, anything to add? Councillors? Yes.
This may not be the forum to ask this question, and tell me if that's the case, but have we learned any lessons about what to do on election night? And I know that apparently the advice was sought by the WA, what do they call it, Electoral Commission, and they advised just make the appointment. But is there something that they will do next time, or they'll lose, or they'll take an immediate count, or something?
The legal issue was between the WA Electoral Commission and the candidate, and it was a matter where the City of Vincent wasn't a party. So it wasn't lessons to be learned for the City of Vincent per se, but since this, not necessarily since this issue, but I think just generally in terms of these issues as part of the local government reform package, one of the proposals is that where there is a vote difference of, I can't recall if it's 10 or 20, 10 votes, that there must be an automatic recount. So there has been some redress through that local government reform process, which is yet to be enacted, but that was the intent. Optional, preferential, that's slightly different, but thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Look, I just would also comment that I think when I first looked at this matter, I did really need to have some clarification from administration and then did seek some additional advice from WELGA on the policy in terms of the particular clause that talks about that that the council member is seeking legal representation costs in relation to the functions of the council member and how it is relevant to the performance of those functions. So additional information was sought. Councillor Apollo has provided the application in the form required under the policy, and WELGA's advice was quite clear that if the invalidity complaint was related to actions taken or not taken by Councillor Apollo before he was declared elected, then it would be a personal matter and not related to the council member's role. But if the invalidity complaint was declared once council member was in the role, that it did, I think the wording here from WELGA, not to misrepresent their wording. Councillor Apollo is therefore a council member and may be considered to be acting in his council member role when, as a consequence of his election to office, he was required to respond to the Court of Disputed Returns subpoena. I also do want to say that Councillor Apollo had not been informed during induction about the existence of the policy, the legal representation for council members and employers policy, and I think that it is a lesson learned that council members do need to be advised of this policy as soon as they are receiving induction, because it is important, and under the policy it would ordinarily require a council member to discuss an application with the CEO prior to receiving legal advice and the city to be paying for that. In the circumstances, because Councillor Apollo was not advised, he was not able to have that conversation, and that was not Councillor Apollo's fault. He was not aware that the policy existed until later. So I hope that administration has taken that on board and that council members would seek to discuss first with the CEO prior to engaging legal representation, because that is what the policy ordinarily requires. So on the basis of the revised received from administration and WELGA, I'm happy to support the application. Any further comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. That is our last item of business for this evening. We did previously have that as a confidential item, so just to make sure there's no confusion, that was formerly item 17.1 under the council briefing agenda, but we have just dealt with that as item 12.3. So thank you all for your attendance. Thank you, administration, for your advice this evening, and declare the meeting closed at 9:30 p.m.